Today, we dive into 5 cases from Japan, a country famous for its low crime and homicide rate. However, hidden horrors lurk among this haven of technological expertise and cultural significance. Welcome, dear viewer, to another Ace Mysteries video. Mikio Miyazawa, a 44-year-old businessman, his wife Yasuko Miyazawa, a 41-year-old housewife and their 2 children, Nina Miyazawa and Rei Miyazawa, respectively aged 8 and 6. The family was known to have lived a seemingly normal life and peaceful life in their residence. On December 30th, 2000, a storm would trouble their peaceful waters. It is believed that the perpetrators entered the residence through a window on the first floor. The exact method used to gain entry remains unclear, as there were no signs of forced entry or damage to the property. This has led investigators to speculate that the intruders may have had knowledge of the home's layout and security measures, or that they possess specific skills to bypass any defenses. It's also possible that the intruder or intruders knew the family on a personal level and thus were given access to the property willingly. Once inside, the attackers proceeded to carry out a meticulously planned assault on the Miyazawa family. They bound each member of the family, including Mikio, Yasuko, and their 2 children, Nina and Rei. The victims were then subjected to a brutal and fatal attack, involving multiple stab wounds. The violence inflicted upon the family was extensive and the injuries sustained by the victims were severe. The level of brutality exhibited in the attack shocked investigators and the public alike. Following the crime, the perpetrators left the scene undetected. Despite the extensive investigation and scrutiny of the crime scene, law enforcement authorities were unable to identify the exact identities or motives of the individuals responsible for the Miyazawa family murder. The lack of solid leads and the absence of a clear motive have made it exceptionally challenging to solve the case. The mysterious circumstances surrounding the access to the home, along with the calculated nature of the attack, have contributed to the intrigue and speculation surrounding the case. The identity and the motive of the perpetrators in the Miyazawa family murder remain unknown, leaving the case unresolved and the Miyazawa family's tragic fate unavenged. While the identities of these individuals have not been widely disclosed, there are 3 notable suspects who have garnered attention and speculation in relation to the case. One of the initial suspects in the case was a neighbor who had displayed unusual behavior following the murders. The individual reportedly exhibited an obsession with the crime and had made disturbing comments to acquaintances. However, after further investigation, including alibi checks and scrutiny of evidence, the neighbor was eventually ruled out as a suspect. Law enforcement authorities thoroughly scrutinized the neighbor's background and activities, seeking to establish any links between their behavior and the crime. This involved conducting interviews, examining their alibi, and conducting investigations into their personal history. But as the investigation progressed, it became evident that the evidence against the neighbor was insufficient to establish their involvement in the murders. After thorough examination and elimination of other suspects, the focus on the neighbor gradually diminished. It's important to note while they were initially considered a person of interest, they were eventually ruled out as a suspect in the Miyazawa family murder case. The exact reasons behind their exclusion have not been publicly disclosed. Another significant suspect in the case was a pizza delivery man who had visited the Miyazawa residence on the evening of the murders. The individual had a criminal record and had been involved in previous incidents of violent behavior. Investigators thoroughly investigated his potential involvement, but no concrete evidence linking him to the crime was found. Subsequent DNA testing also failed to establish a connection, leading to his eventual elimination as a suspect. Now, despite the questioning of several individuals, law enforcement has not publicly disclosed any definitive suspects who remain under active investigation. The identity of the actual perpetrator or perpetrators responsible for the Miyazawa family murder remains unknown, leaving the case in a state of unsolved mystery. It's important to note that the information available about these suspects is based on public speculation and media reports, which may not be entirely accurate. The lack of conclusive evidence and the ongoing investigation have contributed to the continued uncertainty surrounding the case. Investigators continue to explore leads and pursue new avenues of inquiry in their efforts to bring justice to the Miyazawa family and solve this perplexing crime. One notable piece of evidence was the presence of bloodstains throughout the Miyazawa family residence. These bloodstains were found in multiple locations, indicating the violent nature of the attack. Forensic experts meticulously examined these bloodstains, collecting samples for DNA analysis and attempting to determine if they could provide any valuable leads or information about the perpetrators. In addition to bloodstains, investigators also discovered binding materials used to restrain the victims. These materials, such as duct tape or cords, were found in close proximity to the bodies. The examination of these items aimed to identify any fingerprints, DNA, or other trace evidence that could help identify the persons responsible. Furthermore, investigators thoroughly combed the crime scene for any additional physical evidence that could shed light on the identity or motive of the perpetrators. This would have included searching for fingerprints, footprints, fibers, or other trace elements that could provide clues or establish connections. It's worth noting that the exact details of the evidence, including any potential DNA matches or other significant findings, have not been publicly disclosed. Authorities often withhold specific details about evidence to maintain the integrity of ongoing investigations and to prevent the compromise of potential leads. Given the close proximity to the family, one would think the neighbor or the pizza delivery driver were the most likely candidates for the murders. However, we theorize that it's more than likely that a business associate of Mikio may have been driven to the murder. Perhaps there were changes in the company that Mikio was responsible for. Maybe Mikio was responsible for the perpetrators firing and in a disgruntled state murdered the family for retribution. Unfortunately, given the nature of the evidence, we may never know. The Shimoyama Incident, also known as the disappearance and death of Sadanori Shimoyama, the first president of Japanese National Railways, occurred on July 5, 1949. In Tokyo, Shimoyama vanished on his way to work and his body was discovered the next day on the Joban line in Adachi. The incident sparked conflicting explanations involving suicide and murder. While the police did not publicly disclose the results of their investigation, subsequently closed, leaving many questions unanswered. Sadanori Shimoyama was a bureaucrat of the Ministry of Transport and became the president of JNR when it was established in June 1949. He was responsible for implementing drastic personnel cutbacks as part of the Dodge Line policy, a measure imposed by the US government to reduce the political influence of the Japanese Communist Party. Shimoyama released a list of approximately 30,000 employees to be fired, a decision that encouraged heavy pressure from high-level US military officials who wanted to ensure the implementation of the cutbacks. On July 5th, Shimoyama left his home in Ota, Tokyo. Around 8:20 a.m., he stopped at the Mitsukoshi department store in the Onbashi and later returned to Chiyoda Bank office in front of Tokyo Station. At around 9:37 a.m., Shimoyama entered the Mitsukoshi store, instructing his driver to wait for 5 minutes. This was the last time he was seen or heard from. When Shimoyama failed to arrive at JNR headquarters for an important meeting scheduled at 9 a.m., his absence caused great concern and led to a police investigation. On July 6, Shimoyama's dismembered body was found on the Joban line between Kita Senju Station and Ayase Station in Adachi. It was determined that he had been hit by a train. Numerous sightings of an individual resembling Shimoyama were reported, including at the Mitsukoshi store on a Ginza Line subway train bound for Asakusa Station. Witnesses claimed to have seen him at various locations near where his body was discovered. The investigation into the incident revealed that Shimoyama's body had been dismembered by an outbound freight train, number 869, pulled by locomotive D51651. The cause of death was not definitively established, but the injury suggested the possibility of significant force, such as kicking. Some experts believed Shimoyama died prior to being hit by the train, while others suggested he was alive at the time of the impact. The Shimoyama incident generated controversy and differing opinions among forensic experts. Tanemoto Furuhata, a Tokyo University professor of forensic medicine, conducted the official autopsy and stated that the investigation was ongoing and the premature conclusion should be avoided. Nakadate Kyuhei is a professor at Keio University, believed Shimoyama was alive when hit by the train. These conflicting theories were presented during testimonies before the Committee on Judicial Affairs of the Diet's House of Representatives. The official autopsy conclusion states that there was no official cause of death, but does indicate that blood loss at another location was possible, due to the lack of blood found on the body at the scene. Life-threatening internal bleeding was also found, only possible by considerable force such as a kick or beatings. This could have been caused by the impact of the train, but is also possible to have been the result of assault before being left on the tracks. While the case is closed cold, we may never know what really happened, but it isn't too far-fetched to assume one of two theories. Due to the pressure and guilt from having to cut off so many hardworking people, Shimoyama may have taken his own life due to the shame and pressure built up from the US government. Alternatively, perhaps someone within the company was disgruntled and unstable enough to kidnap, assault, and murder their former employer and leave them on the tracks to make it look like an incident. But again, dear viewer, we may never know. The Hachioji Super Nanpei incident of 1995 in Tokyo, Japan, remains a ghastly case that continues to perplex investigators. This tragic event took place at a local supermarket where 3 female employees were ruthlessly murdered. The circumstances surrounding the crime, including the identities of the culprits, their motives, and the progress of the investigation, have left authorities and the public bewildered. The 3 victims of the Hachioji Super Nanpei incident were innocent women whose lives were abruptly and mercilessly taken away. Among them was 17-year-old Megumi Yabuki, a diligent high school student and part-time supermarket worker with dreams of becoming a nursery school teacher. Megumi's best friend, reflecting on their close bond, fondly recalls their shared interests in baseball, music, and capturing memories at photo booths. Tragically, Megami's anticipation of enjoying the summer festival and witnessing the fireworks with her friends was brutally cut short. Another victim, 16-year-old Hiromi Maeda, was also a high school student and dedicated part-time supermarket worker. Known for her conscientiousness and involvement in community service, Hiromi visited the supermarket on her day off to retrieve her work schedule. Discovering that her friend Megami was still on duty, Hiromi decided to lend a hand with the closing procedures, unaware that this act of kindness would lead to her untimely demise. The third victim, Noriko Inagaki, a 47-year-old night clerk who was relatively new to her position at the supermarket. Speculations about Noriko's past involvement with the underworld, particularly her connections to the Yakuza, surfaced in the aftermath of the incident. Previously working as a hostess, she had opened her own restaurant before closing it and pursuing a career as a licensed caregiver. However, her abrupt and tragic end in the supermarket office raises questions about her past and its potential relevance to the crime. Given Noriko's personal history and the nature of the crime, investigators explored the possibility that her involvement with the Yakuza, if true, could have played a role in her tragic fate. The excessively violent treatment Noriko endured compared to the other victims raised suspicions of a targeted attack, potentially motivated by personal grudges or business-related disputes. At this point, it is well known that business will often involve themselves with the Yakuza financially in exchange for protection against violence. However, it's essential to approach this aspect of the case with caution, as definitive proof of Noriko's connections to the Yakuza has not been established. Investigators have likely pursued leads and conducted interviews to ascertain the validity of these claims, but due to the sensitive nature of organized crime and complexities of the case, concrete evidence has been tricky to find. The Nanpei Owada supermarket, situated in Hachioji, Tokyo, set the stage for this heinous crime. Operating from 10 AM to 9 PM, the store experienced an influx of customers due to a special 4-day summer sale and the anticipation of an upcoming fireworks festival. The night shift at the supermarket was typically staffed by a few employees, with one individual responsible for managing the cash and depositing it into a safe on the second floor, accessible only by an external staircase. The office served as the nerve center for financial transactions. As the evening progressed on the day of the incident, Megami arrived at the supermarket for her 5 PM shift, while Noriko, having received a ride from her friend, arrived shortly before 5 PM. Notably, Noriko's friend, intending to join her for dinner and drinks after her shift, promised to return later to pick her up. With the festival and closing time drawing near, Megami and Noriko focused on serving customers, closing off sections of the supermarket and preparing for the cashing out process. Eyewitnesses reported the presence of a suspicious man in his 50s lingering inside and outside the supermarket around 5:30 PM. As the day shift employee departed around 6:30 PM, only Megami and Noriko remained to manage the store until closing. Meanwhile, Hiromi, visiting to check her work schedule, engaged in conversation with Megami and decided to accompany her to the fireworks festival once her shift ended. With the number of suspicious individuals increasing, the atmosphere inside the supermarket became tense. Witness accounts indicated the presence of additional men in their 40s and 50s loitering in and around the premises. Around 8:30 PM, these individuals were seen acting peculiarly, potentially indicating their involvement in the unfolding tragedy. As the supermarket's closing time approached 9 PM, Megami and Hiromi continued their work, unaware of the imminent danger they faced. Closing the store, they activated the security system, signaling the end of the day's operations. It was at this point that the unthinkable transpired. At 9:15 PM, Noriko made a desperate call to her friend who had promised her a ride home. Worried by Noriko's absence, the friend hurried to the supermarket to investigate. Accompanied by a female restaurant staff member, they made a truly grisly discovery upon entering the office. The lifeless bodies of the 3 victims lay on the floor, bound by duct tape and each fatally shot in the back of the head. The crime scene yielded the critical pieces of evidence that both intrigued investigators and further complicated use. Notably, despite the violent nature of the crime, no substantial evidence of a robbery was found. The safe, which contained a significant amount of money following the busy summer sale, remained securely closed, and no apparent attempts were made to access its contents. This revelation led investigators to question whether robbery was the primary motive for the crime. Detailed examination of the crime scene, it uncovered footprints, bullet casings, and partial fingerprints on the duct tape used to bind the victims. Investigators believed that the footprints and fingerprints could potentially offer crucial leads to identifying the culprits. Additionally, the murder weapon, a .38 caliber Squire's Bingham revolver, traced back to an illegal source in the Philippines, shocked the Japanese public where gun violence is incredibly rare. Throughout the investigation, authorities developed 2 primary theories to explain the motive behind the Hachioji Super Nanpei incident: the failed robbery theory and the grudge theory. Initially, the police suspected that the presence of a significant amount of cash in the safe made the supermarket a target for robbery. However, the absence of any signs of forced entry into the safe, along with its untouched contents, cast doubt on this theory. As investigators scrutinized the details of the crime, an alternative hypothesis began to emerge. The excessively violent treatment inflicted upon Noriko, in contrast to the swift and efficient killings of Megumi and Hiromi, suggested a personal grudge or a professional hit. The possibility that the culprit specifically targeted Noriko, with the other victims being unfortunate witnesses, gained traction among investigators. The Hachioji Super Nanpei incident stands as a willing testament to the dark depths of human cruelty. Despite intensive efforts by law enforcement, the case remains unsolved, leaving the victims' families and the community in a state of despair. The lack of progress, combined with the absence of substantial leads, has perpetuated the mystery surrounding the tragic event. Until new information emerges or fresh leads come to light, the Hachioji Super Nanpei incident will continue to haunt Japan as one of its most perplexing and unresolved cases. Serial killers and mass murderers often captivate our imagination through horror movies and morbid fascination. However, for some unfortunate individuals, these nightmarish scenarios become a harsh reality. In the mid-80s, Japan was gripped by fear as a serial killer known as the vending machine killer struck. But this individual was targeting unsuspecting customers of vending machines. The vending machine killer distinguished himself from typical serial killers through his choice of victims and his method of murder. He solely targeted individuals who had inserted coins into soda vending machines. Unlike most killers who confront their victims face to face, the vending machine killer used poison as his weapon of choice. He slipped toxic substances, particularly paraquat, into beverage bottles left in vending machine dispensers. Across Western Japan, this covert approach allowed the killer to remain detached from witnessing the agonizing demise of his victims. Paraquat, a herbicide poison, inflicted a cruel and torturous death on those unfortunate enough to consume it. Once ingested, paraquat ravages the body over a period of days or even weeks. The poison attacks the kidneys, rendering the victims unable to eliminate it from their system. This leads to organ failure, with the lungs being the primary target. The lungs suffer fibrosis, gradually deteriorating as they filled with fluid, ultimately causing the victims to drown from within. The brutality and excruciating nature of this poisoning method set the vending machine killer apart as a sadistic killer. During the 1980s, Japan experienced a disturbing trend of poison-related crimes. The vending machine killer's actions coincided with other incidents of poisoning in the country. One notable example involved a criminal group known as the Monster with 21 Faces, who targeted candy manufacturers, costing them millions in losses. Additionally, antifreeze was discovered in imported wine and milk containers were tainted at local schools. The wave of media coverage surrounding the vending machine killer's crimes sparked a series of copycat poisonings, further adding to the atmosphere of fear and pure uncertainty. The vending machine killer meticulously planned his attacks, utilizing a clever strategy to avoid suspicion while tampering with beverage bottles. Taking advantage of a promotional campaign by a Japanese health drink company, which offered a free extra bottle of Orinamin C, the killer contaminated these bottles or Coke products left in vending machines. The victims unwittingly consumed these poison drinks. Influenced by a cultural trend of leaving additional beverages for others, this act of apparent kindness became their tragic downfall, as they remained unaware of the danger lurking within the bottles. The vending machine killer's poisonings occurred in two distinct waves, each categorized by specific poisons used. The initial wave included attacks involving both Orinamin C and a regional Coca-Cola beverage called Real Gold. Another poison called Diquat was also employed during this period. However, the second wave exclusively involved paraquat and Orinamin C, indicating a shift in the killer's methodology. The motive behind these killings remains a subject of speculation, with some considering a possible connection to public dissatisfaction regarding mislabeled health drinks. The poisonings abruptly ceased after 1985, leaving the investigators with no leads or tangible evidence to pursue. Despite their efforts, the authorities were unable to identify the culprit behind these heinous crimes. The limited forensic technology available in 1985 further hindered the investigation. Speculation arose regarding the involvement of the Monster with 21 Faces, notorious for extorting food manufacturers through poisoning. However, the methods employed by the vending machine killer differed from those of the criminal group, who denied any association with the vending machine killers. A second wave of poison drinks appeared in vending machines in 1998. Whether this resurgence was linked to the original killer or the work of a copycat influenced by the previous crimes remains uncertain. To this day, no arrests have been made in connection with either set of crimes, leaving the case of the vending machine killer as cold as the beverages served. Now on to our final case, the Inokashira Park dismemberment. On the morning of April 23, 1994, a startling discovery was made in Tokyo's Inokashira Park. A janitor going about his usual duties stumbled upon a plastic bag containing human remains. This macabre find marked the beginning of a murder case that would baffle investigators and frighten the public's collective consciousness. As the janitor unwittingly opened the plastic bag, the horrifying reality of the situation unfolded before his eyes. Multiple trash cans within the park contained 27 severed limbs and body parts, carefully concealed in waste disposal bags with holes for draining water. Intriguingly, the bags were tied with a knot commonly used by fishermen in the region, adding a peculiar twist to the investigation. Despite attempts to destroy fingerprints on the victim's fingers and toes, partial prints remained intact, providing valuable evidence for identification purposes. Forensic examination revealed that the victim referred to as S by authorities was a 35-year-old male architect residing near the park. The meticulous dismemberment of his body into precisely 20-centimeter pieces showcased a high level of skill, likely executed with an electric saw. The cuts displayed remarkable precision, focusing on specific dimensions of the muscle tissue. The exact cause of death could not be definitively determined due to the absence of physical trauma or drug traces. However, antemortem hemorrhage marks on the victim's ribs suggested the possibility of being cut while still alive. Unfortunately, no further forensic evidence linking to a perpetrator was uncovered, leaving the murder unresolved. Authorities noted that the body had been thoroughly washed of blood, a task that required both extensive anatomical knowledge and access to a significant water supply, beyond typical household systems. The removal of blood in such a meticulous manner implied the involvement of a highly skilled medical expert or an individual with similar expertise. While most of the victim's fingerprints had been deliberately scraped off, some were missed, aiding the identification progress. Curiously, the torso, chest, and genitals were notably absent among the dismembered body parts and have never been recovered. One theory suggests that trash bags containing these missing parts were unknowingly collected by janitorial workers the day prior to the discovery of the remaining body, subsequently taken to a waste disposal center. S had been an architect living near Inokashira Park leading up to his untimely demise. He had affiliations with an undisclosed religious organization in Tokyo. On the night of April 22nd, S reportedly ended a relationship with an acquaintance, after which his whereabouts became unknown. Eyewitnesses provided conflicting accounts. One claimed to have witnessed a man resembling S being assaulted by two individuals near a department store close to his residence. Another account mentioned observing two suspicious individuals carrying plastic bags in Inokashira Park around 4 a.m. However, the lack of physical injuries on the victim's body cast doubts on the credibility of the assault witness. Extensive interviews with S's friends and acquaintances yielded no substantial evidence pointing to a specific culprit. The victim living quarters were thoroughly searched but provided no significant leads. Unfortunately, the investigative team dwindled as many officers were reassigned to the high-profile 1995 sarin gas attack on the Tokyo subway, to be covered in another video. Eventually, in 2009, the statute of limitations expired, leaving the case officially unresolved. The initial media attention on the Inokashira Park murder was overshadowed by the tragic China Airlines Flight 140 crash that occurred just 3 days later. Many investigators who had been working on the case were subsequently redirected to the sarin gas attack investigation. As a result, the Inokashira Park murder remained unresolved and faded from the public eye over time. Several theories emerged over the years, including the possibility of a revenge attack by the person with whom S ended his relationship, or involvement from the religious organization to which she belonged. However, due to the meticulous dismemberment and the need for specialized resources, such as an industrial water supply, the prevailing theory suggests the involvement of an organized crime group in the area. In 2015, an individual used the pseudonym K came forward, sharing a compelling account that added another layer of complexity to the case. K, who conducted business near the murder site, claimed to have been mistaken for S on multiple occasions, as their warehouses were in close proximity. K admitted to biased practices against foreign street vendors in the area, revealed that one particular vendor had links to an unspecified foreign criminal organization. K believes that the murder resulted from a case of mistaken identity, with the organization targeting S instead of him. Fearing retribution, K remained silent for years, eventually leaving the industry and keeping his account hidden. The Inokashira Park murder of 1994 has captured the imagination of those intrigued by unsolved mysteries. That's why you're here, right? Despite the initial media attention and a long investigative process, the case gradually faded into obscurity, as these things often do, leaving behind unanswered questions and unresolved theories. The identity of the killer, their motives, and the fate of the missing body parts continue to elude both investigators and the public, adding to the enduring mystique surrounding the chilling crime. What do you think of these cases, dear viewer? Did we miss any key points on any of these cases? Let us know in the comments below. As always, if you have enjoyed this video, please consider leaving a like and subscribing for more true crime content every week.